I'm Julia Sondu, showing you where development is happening. Please come and join us. South Africa asks UN court to urgently examine Israel's targeting of Rafah in ongoing case. The South African government says it has lodged an urgent request with the UN's International Court of Justice to consider whether Israel's military operations targeting the southern Gaza city of Rafah are a breach of provisional orders. South Africa's government said Tuesday it had lodged an urgent request with the UN's International Court of Justice to consider whether Israel's military operations targeting the southern Gaza city of Rafah are a breach of provisional orders the court handed down last month. South Africa said it asked the court to weigh whether Israel's strikes on Rafah and its intention to launch a ground offensive on the city where 1.4 million Palestinians have sought shelter reaches both the UN Convention and preliminary orders handed down by the court last month. Rafah is on the border with Egypt, which has warned that an offensive on the city now holding more than half of Gaza's population would bring disaster. South Africa's government said in a statement that Rafah was the last refuge for surviving people in Gaza. It asked the top UN court to consider using its powers to issue additional preliminary orders telling Israel to halt the destruction there. South Africa already alleged Israel is committing genocide against the Palestinian people in its war against the Hamas militant group in Gaza and filed a case with the World Court in December. A ruling on the allegation could take years. South Africa also asked the court to order a ceasefire by Israel, but the justices stopped short of that. In its new filing, South Africa's government said it was gravely concerned that the unprecedented military offensive against Rafah, as announced by the State of Israel, has already led to and will result in further large-scale destruction. South Africa said it was asking that the matter be dealt with urgently in light of the toll in Gaza. On Tuesday night, the court confirmed in a message on X, formerly Twitter, that it had received South Africa's new request. It did not comment further. If the court decides to hold another hearing on the request for further provisional measures, it would likely then rule within weeks. Israel strongly denies committing in Gaza and says it does all it can to spare civilians and is only targeting Hamas militants. It says Hamas' tactic of embedding in civilian areas makes it difficult to avoid civilian casualties. Israel's assault has wrought destruction in Gaza. Around 80% of the population has been displaced, and the UN says a humanitarian aid has pushed more than a quarter of Palestinians in Gaza towards starvation. South Africa has accused Israel of ignoring the court's preliminary ruling in the days after it was issued by continuing to civilians. Israel believes it has license to do as it wishes, Foreign Minister Naledi Pandor said. South Africa's legal efforts are rooted in issues central to its identity. Its governing party, the African National Congress, has long compared Israel's policies in Gaza and the West Bank to its own history under the apartheid regime of white minority rule, which restricted most blacks to homelands. Apartheid ended in 1994. Israel's military assault in Gaza was described last week as over the top by US President Joe Biden, a strong criticism from a close ally. The White House said Biden has also warned Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu that Israel should not conduct a military operation against Hamas in Rafah without a credible and executable plan to protect civilians. Why Rafah is a key flashpoint in the Gaza war. Israel's war in Gaza is approaching a new inflection point as forces prepare to enter the southern Gaza city of Rafah, which is temporarily home to some 1.5 million Palestinians sheltering from the war. The Biden administration has delivered increasingly forceful warnings to ensure Israel comes up with an adequate safety plan for keeping citizens safe in Rafah, as concerns grow of a potentially huge loss of life in the city that could spark a new wave of pressure and condemnation of Israel's war against the Palestinian militant group Hamas. The pressure over Rafah is also leading to major tensions with Israel's neighbors, as Jordan issued a stern warning against an attack there and Egypt said it will not allow the displacement of Palestinians over the border. Khaled El-Gandhi, the Palestine Program Director at the Middle East Institute, said he fears Rafah will become another dark milestone for the US and Israel to move past. Could this be an inflection point? Yes. But if the past 4 months are any indication, it's probably not, he said. It will be just one more layer that's been added of a tea that we say, oh, that was awful. And then it just sort of grinds on because nobody knows how this is supposed to end, he added. Israel says it must move into Rafah, the last remaining safe zone in Gaza, because Hamas militant fighters are hiding battalions there. The military has vowed to crush Hamas in response to the October 7th attack and saw the taking of 240 hostages, about 130 of whom still remain in Gaza. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has ordered his military to draft a plan to evacuate civilians before moving into the Rafah refugee camp. He has insisted an evacuation plan is possible and that Rafah is a military necessity to dismantle Hamas. Victory is within reach, Netanyahu said on Fox News this week, claiming that 3/4 of Hamas battalions have been destroyed in the war. We're not going to leave the other 6 battalions. A Rafah invasion has been brewing for weeks as Israel wraps up operations in the central part of southern Gaza, including Khan Yunis. With the fighting imminent, human rights groups are sounding the alarm on a never-before-seen scale if fighting spreads to Gaza's last refugee camp, which is the only place for humanitarian aid to enter Gaza. Omar Shakir, the Israel and Palestine director at Human Rights Watch, said a Rafah raid would jeopardize aid distribution and imperil emergency responders helping Palestinians access basic necessities including food, water and medicine, which are reaching alarmingly low rates. In every facet, there are significant risks, Shakir said. Amanda Klaasing, National Director for Government Relations at Amnesty International, said she has significant concerns. But Rafah is strategically valuable in Israel's effort to completely defeat Hamas, which is using the entire Gaza Strip for its operations, said former Israeli intelligence official Avi Melamed. He said Israel could move into a new phase after Rafah, the last major city that Israeli forces have yet to fight in. Hamas projects and views itself as a regional player, and it needs to shrink into proportions where it will not be able to continue to play this role, Melamed said. And the way to do that actually requires 2 major elements. One is to significantly crush the Hamas military spine, which is exactly what Israel has been doing. And the other thing is to reduce its role in Gaza, which is actually the final phase. That phase would include developing a regional scaffolding for the post-war rule of Gaza, involving the Arab world and the international community, but this strategy would also likely involve an enduring Israeli military presence for the time being, Melamed added. Meanwhile, on February 13, 2024, South Africa asks UN court to urgently examine Israel's targeting of Rafah in ongoing case. The South African government says it has lodged an urgent request with the UN's International Court of Justice to consider whether Israel's military operations targeting the southern Gaza city of Rafah are a breach of provisional orders. This is the end of our program today. See you on Intervlog same time tomorrow. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe to my channel and press the bell icon to get new video updates. Thank you for watching Intervlog. Thank you.